Well, if it's ever happened before, I sure don't remember it. A candidate making a foreign trip in the middle of a campaign and getting the kind of attention that's usually reserved for presidents on especially important trips. Brit, what do you make of Obama's trip and of all the fuss about it?
Well, I think he needed to make the trip. I mean, if you're going to make Afghanistan the central focus of your foreign policy, and you had a subcommittee that you never, with some jurisdiction there where you never held a hearing, and you've never been there, it's good to go. On the other hand, I think there's some pitfalls, and all this publicity that attends this. You know, the network anchors are going, requests by some 200 reporters to go along and so forth. Presidential level attention can also mean presidential level scrutiny. And there are pitfalls. I mean, for example, you had this sort of kerfuffle over the Brandenburg Gate and what came to be seen as the overwhelming inappropriateness of someone who's not elected making a speech where presidents have made celebrated speeches, particularly Ronald Reagan and John F. Kennedy. You had that problem. Then you have the problem, of course, that he started to adjust his position before going and let it be known that he would be open to refining it. And the left went crazy, and then he scuttled back, and he goes down and puts himself in a position where the McCain camp can attack him for making up his mind before he goes. So there are pitfalls. Now, he's so facile and charming that he may be able to pull it off, and I wouldn't count him out. But I think it's tricky.
Jill, how important do you think this trip is to Obama's campaign, and especially to this continuing issue, I think probably his biggest issue, does he pass the commander-in-chief test?
I was just going to say that there was a recent poll where, how do you see the candidates as commander-in-chief? Obama lagged McCain by about 30 points. This is a huge issue. He needs to be seen credibly mingling with the troops, meeting with heads of state, and looking like he can handle it. And I think if voters see him that way, maybe he can close that gap to a certain extent. So while there are certainly a lot of pitfalls, he could say something wrong, and with all that press around, everybody will jump on it. But I think just the image of him out there doing these things has a lot of benefit for him.
Bill, as we've been discussing, Prime Minister Maliki seemed to endorse Obama's plan to get combat troops out in 2 years, mid-2010, and one wonders what kind of back channels there were between the White House and the palace and the Green Zone. He backed off that. But clearly, the Iraqis want a timeline for us to get out of Iraq. Does that give Obama political cover against the attacks from the McCain campaign?
Well, the Iraqis want us to draw down in Iraq, as we do, and as we will do in the next administration now that we're winning the war. They don't want us to get out of Iraq entirely, and I don't think we will or should. And I think no, I think this is marginally helpful to Obama in the sense that it makes his proposal look a little less irresponsible. If McCain gets a moment to explain that Obama's original proposal, of course, was in January of 2007 for a 14-month deadline, which would have lost the war by now, and Obama would not be able to have a nice trip to Iraq and glory, as we should, in the amazing success of U.S. troops over there. If McCain can remind people that Obama's judgment was fundamentally wrong on the surge, I don't know how much difference this really makes.
I don't know how you can make that argument. I mean, the judgment argument is, should we have gotten into this war? And obviously, Barack Obama was right on that point. Shouldn't have gotten into this war.
Well, I don't agree with that, but we won't have that argument now.
But I think that on the larger point, what you see is Rahm Emanuel, the Democratic caucus leader in the House, said, you know what, Barack Obama right now is setting the tone in terms of foreign policy, not only in terms of the argument going on with the McCain campaign, but even for the Bush administration, if they're suddenly talking about horizons. The whole idea you're hearing from the military as well as the political establishment in this town now is moving towards getting away, not putting more forces in there, and in fact the conversation is shifting altogether. I think Barack Obama deserves credit for that. Now, I think that what he's doing, going over there with all of this, and his aides, I must say, solicited a lot of this media attention. Going over there in this way, I don't think helps him. I think it does play into what Brit described as the possibility, if he makes a gaffe, is when he was talking about Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and all that, and got into trouble before. It means that it will have an explosive kind of resonance throughout the campaign.
Yeah, but he wasn't going to slink over there and sneak over and nobody know it. I mean, it's a story.
Well, no, it's a story, but you could go over and do the fact-finding and maybe take your normal contingent of press, especially on the European part of the trip, but the part of the trip that's paid for by U.S. taxpayers, going to Iraq and going to Afghanistan.
He doesn't have any press on that part of the press.
There is press on the ground that's going to talk, and Laura Logan is talking to him for CBS and will likely end up on 60 Minutes tonight.
I understand that, but they are on the ground. They weren't part of the traveling party, and the taxpayers are not paying for them.
I know, but Juan's right on this point. I mean, they dangled network interviews, and the anchors, it was decided by the network chiefs that the anchors would do them. This could easily have been avoided. If he wanted to make this a business only, no big publicity, I mean, there'd have been some coverage, obviously, but he could have kept it low-key if he chose to. But you sense a mindset here. You see it in the idea that they had that it would be good for Obama to speak at the Brandenburg Gate as if he were now a figure sufficiently large to merit that. You see it in this level of coverage that they're encouraging. To treat him as if he is a savior of some kind who is now coming to save us all, it is dangerous. So
I think the big question right now is whether the media is going to look into itself and say, wow, look at all this attention we're giving Senator Obama. How come we haven't gone with Senator McCain on his last 3 trips out of the country? And how are we going to cover him into the future? Because there's no question there's a disparity between the coverage the two candidates get. And do you think that's because, by objective standards, it's a better news story, or do you think that it shows political bias, Jim? I'm not sure if it's political bias, but for whatever reason, the media is excited about Obama. He's the new thing, and McCain is not. And McCain is suffering for that. For a long time, the excuse was the Democratic primary was going on and on and on, and the attention was focused there, so McCain was getting short shrift. But at this point, there's no excuse. There are 2 candidates for their parties. They both deserve equal coverage.
I think it makes sense to give him a lot of coverage. I don't begrudge it to him. Never before have we had someone running for president at a time of war who was so unqualified to be commander-in-chief. No, I don't mean that. I don't mean that in a polemical way. I mean, it is just, he's never been to Afghanistan, which he says is the central front in the war we're fighting. He's been to Iraq once before the conditions changed. It's good that he's going, God knows, and it's perfectly reasonable for the media to scrutinize what he does, but he's not giving them any access to speak of anyway. So I mean, he'll do fine on this trip. It's not going to change anyone's mind.
Was it Andrew Tyndall who measures such things found that over the past 2 months or something, this is really since Obama had clinched this, that the network even newscaster devoted 114 minutes or something like that to Obama and 48 to McCain. Now, I think Obama is in many respects the bigger story because the novelty factor with Obama has not yet worn off, and some imbalance, it seems to me, would be reasonable news judgment. 114 to 48? I don't think so. All
right. We have to step aside for a moment, but up next, some big changes in the president's foreign policy this week, which may work to the benefit of Barack Obama. We'll discuss it after this quick break.